Alright, let's dive into something that's got the football world buzzing, the 2026-27 Champions League draw. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me just say this. The way UEFA's been handling things lately, it's like they're trying to outdo themselves in terms of controversy. Gianni Infantino's recent antics have put them in the spotlight, but not necessarily for the right reasons. Personally, I think this is a double-edged sword, more attention on the Champions League, sure, but also more scrutiny on how it's run. And let's be honest, the new format hasn't exactly been a slam dunk. The bloated league phase is a player's nightmare. With the 2026 World Cup already stretching seasons to their limits, the 2026-27 calendar feels like it's just piling on. What makes this really interesting is how UEFA is trying to balance innovation with tradition, but it's starting to feel like they're losing the plot. Now, let's talk about the draw itself. Remember the good old days when the Champions League draw was a live event with actual people pulling balls out of pots? Those days are gone. Automation is the name of the game now, and while it's efficient, it's also kind of boring. In my opinion, part of the magic of the Champions League was the drama of the draw, the human element. Now it's just algorithms doing the heavy lifting. But hey, progress, right? So who's in the mix this time? The Premier League and La Liga are dominating with 5 teams each, but here's where it gets spicy. 6 of those 10 teams are in Pot 1. Arsenal, Manchester City, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid, these are the heavy hitters. What many people don't realize is that Arsenal's rise to Pot 1 is a big deal. They've leapfrogged Borussia Dortmund on the coefficient front, which is no small feat, and let's not forget Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich, and Inter Milan rounding out Pot 1. If you take a step back and think about it, this pot is a who's who of European football. Now, Pot 2 is where things get really intriguing. Aston Villa, fresh off their Europa League win, are in there, and so is Manchester United, back in the Champions League after a 2-year hiatus. But here's the kicker. Despite their long-awaited returns, Roma and Real Betis are also in Pot 2. From my perspective, this pot is a mix of established powerhouses and teams looking to make a statement. Sporting CP, Porto, Club Brugge, and PSV Eindhoven are no slouches either. They've been regulars in the competition this decade. What this really suggests is that Pot 2 could be the most competitive of the bunch. Pots 3 and 4 are still taking shape, but we've got some interesting names in there. Feyenoord, Lille, RB Leipzig, Napoli, Villarreal, Galatasaray, and Shakhtar Donetsk in Pot 3 solid teams, but not quite at the level of the top 2 pots. And then there's Pot 4 with Slavia Prague, Stuttgart, Como, and Lens. A detail I find fascinating is that Como, a Serie A outfit, is the only debutant in the 2026-27 league phase. It's a David in a sea of Goliaths, and I'm curious to see how they'll fare. The draw itself is set for August 27th, the day after the playoffs wrap up. It'll be at UEFA's headquarters in Nyon, Switzerland, likely starting at 5 p.m. British summer time. But here's the thing, with automation, the draw will probably be over before you can even grab a snack. Efficient, yes, but where's the fun in that? Now, let's talk about Manchester United. They're in Pot 2, which means they're almost guaranteed a tough draw. Personally, I think this is a make-or-break moment for them. After a 2-year absence, they're back on the big stage, but they're not in the top tier. This raises a deeper question. Can they compete with the likes of Pot 1 teams? Or will they be just another mid-table European side? What makes this really interesting is that their performance in the Champions League could define their season and their future. Finally, let's look ahead to the final. Madrid is hosting again, this time at Atletico Madrid's Riyadh Air Metropolitano. It's the 3rd time since 2010 that the Spanish capital will host the final, and the 2nd time at this stadium. The 2019 final between Liverpool and Tottenham Hotspur was, let's just say, underwhelming. But here's the thing. The Champions League final is always a spectacle, no matter the teams involved. What this really suggests is that UEFA is playing it safe, sticking with a tried-and-true location. But is that a good thing? Or does it take away from the novelty of the event? In my opinion, the 2026-27 Champions League is shaping up to be a season of contrasts. On one hand, you've got the efficiency of automation and the dominance of the usual suspects. On the other, you've got teams like Como making their debut and Manchester United trying to reclaim their place among the elite. If you take a step back and think about it, this season could be a turning point for European football. Will it live up to the hype? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, I'll be watching every minute of it. And I'm curious, what do you think? Who's your dark horse this season? Let me know in the comments below.